Hello, everybody. So Keir Starmer yesterday he presented his plan to change Great Britain, and he also talked about energy very briefly. I mean, it's basically doubling down on something that they said a couple of weeks ago already. But the question is this good enough? And as you can see from the picture that I'm using, wind scam exposed. This should give you pause. You know, what is the UK doing? What are they trying to do? Is it smart what they're trying to do? And to some degree, I do think that it is smart, and to some degree, I do think that it is good that they show some form of ambition. But the question is, can that ambition be achieved? So the 6 takeaways from Keir Starmer's plan for change. This is the BBC website. I'm going to scroll down. It's interesting, putting more money in the pockets of working people, building 1.5 million homes. I mean, just look at the Netherlands. I live in the Netherlands. We have 1 million homes. We are short 1 million homes in the Netherlands. So even if the UK is building 1.5 million homes, I think that they might be in trouble even deeper than the Netherlands. So 1.5 million homes is a good start. Then treating 92% of the NHS patients within 18 weeks. Okay, I've got nothing to say about that. I'm all for healthcare. I'm the only thing that I find important is that everybody who has something gets treated, and if it's something life-threatening, then they don't have to wait in order to make sure that their lives can be saved. That's my whole rationale about healthcare. And that's coming from somebody whose wife works in healthcare. Let me say that. Then recruiting 13,000 more police officers, special constables, and PCSOs in the neighborhood roles. I think that this is good. My father is a policeman, so I'm also I'm telling you now. You know, I lived the every people's life, basically. My mother works in healthcare too, in the elderly care. 13,000 more police officers. I think that, if the country's unsafe, or if there's a problem with law enforcement, then you need more police officers. So this seems quite a logical choice as well. And then making sure 3/4 of 5-year-olds are school ready. Well, duh. I mean, if you want to play the game, if you want to be in the geopolitics game, if you want to be in the international economy game, if you want to, show that you are financially viable, the least thing that you need is, educated people. And, 5-year-olds school ready. In the Netherlands, kids go to school when they are 4. That's when their primary education begins. And then finally, 95% of clean power by 2030. 95% of clean power by 2030. That's over here. It's very nice that we get all this advertisement in between. So the Prime Minister said being on track for 95% clean power by 2030 was one of his milestones. But before and during the election, Labour constantly spoke about zero carbon electricity by 2030. And this was what the party's manifesto promised. Sir Keir denied he was rowing back on 100% zero carbon, telling the reporters that a clean energy pledge is today exactly what it was in the election. There was always going to be a mix of energy sources. I mean, that's just saying, birds fly. The sun comes up every day. Of course, a power system, a natural grid is always going to consist of multiple energy sources, especially in a country as populous and as industrious as the UK. Are you crazy? It can't run on a single energy source, even though many of my supporters would like to pretend that it could. So let's see. It says gas should provide less than 5% of Great Britain's generation in a typical weather year. 2 years ago, and this is the hot take. This is the hot take. It says gas should provide less than 5% of Great Britain's generation in a typical year. And there's a big problem with wind. Many people know. And this is what we are going to highlight. I'm going to tell you that Keir Starmer's plan has already failed. It won't succeed because the UK power grid depends on gas to bail them out whenever the sun isn't shining, the wind isn't blowing. And the main problem for the UK is that they don't have batteries. Nobody has batteries at this scale, even though many people like to pretend that we are building a lot of batteries and that it is really going to matter. It is not. Fortunately, I don't have any real figures to prove this point, but be certain I will soon. And the main issue is that you need this kinetic energy. You need to have these kinetic systems turning in this system, power generators, kinetic power generators, having literal kinetic energy ready to be delivered onto the grid whenever it is necessary. Because if you don't have that, you need to be able to meet any demand at any time. You need to be able to meet any demand spike at any time. And when the wind is doing, at some places it is blowing really hard, and at some places it is blowing less hard, and then all of a sudden you get a rain shower, and this disturbs the whole energy system, and then all of a sudden you get a doldrum or something else happens. You need something else to take its place in order to make sure that the lights stay on. This is the main problem. So first, last week, and this is very interesting, UK is paying 1 billion to waste a record amount of wind power. So what happens is most of the demand of the UK is in the south. They have a lot of wind farms in Scotland. And because the two transmission lines that run from north to south are, they're constrained. You can't just push all the electricity that's being created in Scotland down those two transmission lines and expect that everything will be hunky-dory. So what happens is, first of all, the throughput of power from north to south is constrained. That's the first problem. And the second problem is, down in the south, they can't bank on wind power being there indefinitely. They just can't. There's no assurance that the wind will stay as powerful as it is at any given moment in Scotland. So what they do in the south is, first, they have their own wind capacity there, because there's a lot of wind capacity being built in the North Sea currently. And what you see is that those don't get curtailed as much as the wind farms in Scotland, but I will show you that on the map later on. But also, I will show you a map where you can see that all these gas-fired generators that are in the south, they're located right next to the places where there is most demand. And these have to be ready to, start working. And because of this transmission problem, because of this unreliability problem, basically what the power companies have to do is they have to keep these gas plants running and keep producing electricity, despite there being more wind, that could potentially push out this gas production, right? And this is an interesting graph over here. Let me enlarge it a little bit. Let's see if you can see if it's better visual like this. Yes, it is. So, orange is 2023. That was last year. Gray is 2024. That's this year. Wind farms are being shut off at a record-setting pace. So we're basically talking about curtailment. So you can see that apart from July, in this year, 2024, more wind was being curtailed than last year. And the people are wondering, how can this be? How can this be? You know, there's more wind capacity this year than there was last year. And, you know, what we are seeing here, and this might come as a surprise to some of you, is that wind is eating wind. This has nothing to do with natural gas, actually. This has to do with wind. This has to do with the fact that UK is building offshore wind farms down in the south, and these offshore wind farms are closer to the centers of high demand, which means that there is transmission capacity there. Yes, you still have your gas plants in order to make sure that they can take over whenever it is necessary. But what you also see is that you're no longer deciding to import all that cheap electricity from Scotland, where these people were like, oh, there's not a lot of people living here, so we are going to put up a lot of wind farms. You know, nobody's going to complain that we're putting up wind farms in this area in southern Scotland, where there's loads of wind and we can all benefit from the wind. Although nobody uses electricity there, well, you know, the amount of electricity usage there is less than the amount of electricity usage in the south. So that's what is going on here. That's the truth. And with Keir Starmer's promise of going to 95% of clean electricity, whatever that may mean, what we see now happening is the following. They're going to double down on this strategy. They're going to say, we're going to build even more wind because we need more wind. And we need more solar. We need even more solar. We believe that we can do this. You know, this is almost religiously. So what they're going to do is they're going to build more wind. And the result is that wind is going to eat more wind. So in the next year, if we would make a graph, 2025, unless they do something with their natural gas, unless they start building huge transmission lines straight to the middle, up to the north, what you're going to see is that this graph becomes even more pronounced. We're talking about sizable volumes here. So in August, for instance, 1K gigawatt hour, so 1 terawatt hour was curtailed. More than 1 terawatt hour was curtailed in August, which is a stupid amount of energy. You know, a nuclear power plant, a 1 gigawatt nuclear power plant generates 8 terawatt hours per year. And during August, that's 1/12 of a year, they curtailed more than 1.2, 1.3 terawatt hours. So in essence, what they were doing was they were saying to more than one gigawatt nuclear power plant, you have to shut down. That's the equivalent of what is going on here. All right. Now let's see. There's loads more. Congestion costs, right? Last month, for example, when Storm Bert swept across the UK, some of its newest and biggest wind parks were still Scotland's $3 billion sea green project owned by SSE plc and Total Energies, fossil fuel company, was shut off. SSE Viking's development on the Shetland Islands was also closed. This has nothing to do... I mean, sure, if the wind speeds are excessive, you want to stop your wind farm. It is no longer a question of whether you want to produce the electricity at that moment or not. It is a matter of, will your assets weather through this storm? That's the real question there. So the utility aims to build even bigger wind farm off Scotland that could further aggravate the bottleneck unless the grid is expanded. So the problem, Scotland, loads of space, not a lot of people to object. The idea that they can power the rest of the UK, but forgetting that the transmission capacity down to the south simply is not enough. And then they say wind versus gas as if this is a versus thing, and I'm going to show you that it is not. UK generators usually sell output in advance on the wholesale market, but those transactions don't take into account the physical limitations of balancing supply and demand in real time. To keep the lights on, the operator steps in, paying some plants to turn off and others that are closer to demand centers to fire up. That's what I told you. Often this means shutting off a far-flung wind farm and starting up a gas plant that's closer to a city. And then they say the outdated rules of our energy system mean that vast amounts of cheap green power go to waste. Sam Cloughton. I would say Clem Clownton. Director of External Affairs at supplier Octopus Energy Group. It is absurd that Britain is paying Scottish wind farms to turn off when it's windy, while simultaneously paying gas power stations in the south to turn on. This is the outrage, the outraged person who is working on the transition, and the transition isn't working because of the stupid rules. It's not working because of the stupid rules. It's not the rules. It's the physical reality. The fact that you built your supply too far away from the demand, and the fact that the supply doesn't match to the demand. I mean, it's not rocket science. So then we get this over here. Let's see, there was another thing over here. This is interesting, right? I don't know if this is a credible news source or not, but and in the first 11 months of 2024, the cost of temporary shutdowns has skyrocketed into 10-figure sums, beating out 2023 779 million and 2022's 945 million. Paying somebody who owns a wind farm to stop producing electricity here. I'm going to, I don't want you to bring my mail anymore. Here's $100. I mean, that's a stupid. I don't want you to bring me milk anymore. Here's $100. Please stop bringing me milk. That's the kind of stupidity that we're talking about here. So let's go to this wind map, right? Here we can see basically at this moment we have a northern wind, but as you can see, it's not uniform all over Great Britain. So over here it's coming from the west and it's going down south. Over here it's coming slightly from the south and going over to the east. It's just weird, and there's storm system. The Netherlands is incredibly windy at this moment, but this is interesting. All these circles. Now, unfortunately, they don't let me turn this around. So this is what we have to work with. This is the UK over here, and all these circles, they represent wind farms. Now the colored bit, let me see if I can change it. This is better. You have the colored bit over here. This is curtailment. So at this moment there's little to no curtailment. If you normalize this is basically normalized for the amount of power that is being produced. So what you see over here, right, is Scotland basically starts around here-ish, right? So you have over here is Liverpool and Manchester, and I believe Blackpool. Yeah, Blackpool is over here. So there's a couple of reasonably large wind farms over here in the sea between the United Kingdom and Ireland. As you can see, this thing has 1,000 megawatts of capacity, and it's only producing 212 megawatts at this moment. This thing over here is 592 megawatts of capacity, and it's only producing 168 megawatts. Can you see the pattern? Over here, the Clyde wind farm, 522 megawatts, and it's only producing 112 megawatts. So what you see is there's loads and loads and loads of wind parks over here, wind farms, I should say, right? There's also quite a large wind farm over here. 1130 megawatts, output 660. Let's see, it's weird, right? Is this better? Yeah, this is better. I don't know this. I don't understand the scaling. Maybe I am too dumb. But in any case, so what happens is all these people, all these wind farms over here, they've been put there because they were easy to put there. This was basically saying, Scotland saying, listen, we are going to be the wind champions of Europe, and we are going to build all these wind farms, far more than we need ourselves. But here comes the kicker. At this moment, the United Kingdom is also building their own wind farms. Well, the United Kingdom, Scotland, and England are the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland and Wales. So East Anglia 1, okay, right over here, 680 megawatts of capacity and output at the same time. So this is producing 100%. Over here, Hornsea, 1,218 megawatts, putting out 1,115. So these wind farms over here are producing electricity far more efficiently than these are because the winds are stronger over here, as you can see. You can see by the color, right? This green is not that, blue is not that hard. Green is slightly harder, but red, that's where the real wind production is at this moment, right? So these wind farms are currently eating into the profit of these wind farms. Now, let's go to the map, right? This is a map. Let me enlarge it so it becomes a little bit more clearer. Yeah, I want to enlarge it. Why doesn't it enlarge? Oh my God. Let's see. I press the button. I want to enlarge it. It won't let me enlarge it. For some reason, it says, no, you can't. Okay, well, tough luck. So, this is not the situation as it is, right, over here. But you can see all these dotted lines, they don't exist currently. So, what does exist? Let's go to 2025. This is still not entirely what exists today, but it is good enough. So over here, you can see basically these are the traditional transmission lines that carry power from nuclear power plants. Like I believe that this is Dounreay over here, right? Then we have Sizewell C over here. Hinkley Point C is over here. You know, you can find them quite easily. There's a couple of nuclear power plants over here in Wales. You know, Carnarvon. I mean, it's pretty interesting. But here's the kicker. So, remember we were talking about where Scotland begins. Scotland begins basically at this red line here. Well, no, it doesn't. It does. It starts at this line over here, right? And if we go back to the previous map, what you see basically following that same line from this point up here to this point, right? From this point up here to this point. That's where Scotland begins. So what do we have if we want to export wind power from Scotland to the UK? We've got this line over here, and we have a corridor over here, Newcastle, pretty large power users sitting there, but it's also a large population center, so obviously a lot of power can be used there. And then we have basically two power lines going down there. So this is the constriction, you know. So let's go to the map. So this is the map that I prepared myself. The orange ones are the gas plants. The blue ones were the nuclear power plants. Not all of them are operational. And the black ones, those are the decommissioned power plants. So let me give you another insight into this energy problem that the UK is having. Let's see. Can you see them? The yellow spots. So what I did basically was I mapped out the places where there's a lot of people living and where there's a reasonable amount of industry, economic activity. So you have Glasgow, you've got Edinburgh, then you got Sunderland, Newcastle, Middlesbrough. You know, over here, this is interesting. Blackpool, you know, going all the way through Preston, Blackburn, and then over here to Burnley. This is basically a giant area. Liverpool, Manchester, then you got Birmingham over here, Sheffield, the Sheffield area, Nottingham and Derby, Leeds, you know, these are basically the areas where a lot of energy is being used. Now, what you see is that we're talking about, I mean, it's somewhere between 35 and 40 gigawatts that is being used in the UK, right? Most of that is being used down this line. It's below the Blackpool and what is it, Grimsby, or what do we have here? Hull. Yeah. So you have this line over here: Blackpool, Preston, Blackburn, Bradford, Leeds, and then over here Hull. Most of the power, the 40 gigawatts that we're talking about, 35 gigawatts, let's say 25 gigawatts at least, are being used in the southern portion of the United Kingdom. You still have a lot of energy usage over here, Newcastle, Middlesbrough, and you've got some in Glasgow and Edinburgh, but it's not enough to use up all the wind that they're producing here. So what they're saying is we need to have more electricity consumption in the north, right? So instead of bringing the production to the consumption, now we're going to bring the consumption to the production. We're turning things around. That's the way we're going to fix these things, because it's quite simple. You could try to improve this situation by adding more transmission capacity, which is going to be a tremendous tough thing to do. This also basically means that at this moment, wind expansion in Scotland is dead. There's let me tell you. Let me phrase it differently. If you think that getting paid for shutting down your wind farm is profitable, and if it is indeed profitable, which is why I call wind sometimes a scam, then you would run to Scotland and say, point me to a place where I can build my wind farm. I want to build a wind farm as quickly as possible. That's what I would do. Because they're paying me to shut down my wind farm. I don't care that I can't sell my wind down south. Everybody is trying to get through the same pipeline to get down south to sell their electricity. I don't care. I'm getting paid to be shut down. So it's a business decision. Is the shutdown or the benefits of getting shut down outweighing, the benefits of being able to sell your electricity sometimes? And that's the main problem that we are encountering. Now, this is interesting. So over here, we have the energy dashboard. Here we can see at the highest point, let's see the highest point, 45 gigawatts. So at the highest point, the UK is using 47. So I was off. Sorry. 47, nearly 50 gigawatts is what the UK is using, right? So let's see. Can I zoom in? Let's zoom in. I'm going to zoom in post so that you can see what is happening. So if you go over this graph over here, you can see a correlation between gas and wind, right? It's almost like a heartbeat. So if I go this way, what you see is gas is getting more and more and more and more. Wind is getting more. Gas is getting less. A lot of wind means there's not a lot of gas. So at this moment, there's a peak, 18.5 gigawatts of wind, 3.5 gigawatts of gas. And let's see where it turns around, because it does turn around. Oh, for some reason, the graph started updating. Oh, wait a second. It went back to 30 days. I don't want 30 days. I want 15 days. No, I want 14 days. Right. This is what I want. Right. So again, you can see it's like a heartbeat. So 16.9, 19. Okay. So at the top, it was 20 gigawatts. 20 gigawatts of gas production versus 2.4 gigawatts of wind production. There's almost no wind. Saturday, November 9th, 2024. Doldrums, right? Doldrums. Here, even worse. What is this? Oh, that was in the morning. 1.1 gigawatts of wind. 4.5% of the total wind fleet in Scotland and in the UK was producing electricity. So nobody had to be paid to be shut down. Curtailment there was no such thing as curtailment. But even at that moment, 12.7 gigawatts of gas were needed in order to keep the grid running. So if we keep going on, what you can see is this heartbeat, right? So at this moment, you can see wind is, where's the highest point for wind? The highest point for wind here, 12-ish gigawatts, right? 43%, 5.3 gigawatts of gas. And then you can simply see it. If I go, you can see it's almost like a heartbeat. Then you have high wind, low gas, and then you have low gas, high wind. That's just the way it is. That's the relationship between wind and gas. And there's no such thing as wind versus gas. Doesn't exist. The only reason why gas is still online at some points in time is because of what I said. They're closer to the places where the electricity is needed. They can't afford to rely on the variability of the wind in Scotland, plus, all the stuff that can happen in between. So they have to have gas running in order to ensure that the lights are on. It's also interesting is what you can see happening. So when the gas is high, generally the imports are low. But let's see what happened, right? So there's this, the imports lever is also a little heartbeat, right? It goes up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And that obviously that has to do with the day and night rhythm of an economy. But let's see what we can glean. So there's a point when there's a reasonable amount of wind. There's not a lot of gas. It's clearly during the nighttime, right? We're talking about November 16th, 2 o'clock in the morning. The demand is only 27 gigawatts. But still, the UK rather imports nuclear from France at that moment than it runs its own gas plants. And that's also what you can see over here, right? Sunday, November 17th. 7 o'clock in the morning, imports 5.8 gigawatts. And then again, so it happens always during the night. During the night, the imports are mostly higher than they are during the day. And that's because France has electricity to spare, and they are good neighbors. And they say to the United Kingdom, listen, friends, here's our nuclear energy. They also get some electricity from the Netherlands, and I believe that they even can import electricity from Norway. But that's not important. So, going back to the map, this is what they're planning to do. Unfortunately, it's a small map. I can't help it. Right? So over here, you can see clearly, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, 5 power lines going from north to south, feeding into the London area. There's also 1, 2 big lines coming from the west, feeding into the greater London area. So obviously there's a lot of electricity usage there. Birmingham, you can basically say the same. You see how well integrated this high voltage electricity transportation network is over there. Here, the same thing. What I was telling you about. This is basically this corridor in the middle of the country going east-west from Liverpool all the way to Hull, right? Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, Hull. This is an area where there's a lot of electricity consumption. You've got Birmingham over here, and then you've got London, and obviously over here, down here, Southampton, Portsmouth, and let's not forget Swansea and Cardiff. That's also an area where there's where there's a lot of heavy industry, some steel. So this is what the grid looks today-ish, right? There's some plants in there. But it gets absolutely ludicrous. So let's go to 2026. Nothing much happens. 2027, as you can see, they're trying to upgrade they're upgrading the bandwidth, going down. Now we go to 2029. This is the first thing. So now they're planning to do this. It's not an interconnector, but it's a subsea power cable running from over here up north. I believe it's Aberdeen over here, right? Yeah. Well, oh no, it's Peterhead. Yeah, Aberdeen is slightly to the south. So they're planning to build this E403 connector. E4D3, I don't know. Basically trying to collect all this wind up here in the north and basically pumping it through the sea towards this Midlands corridor over here. That's the first step that they would want to do. 2029, right? Then we go to 2030. Oh my God, look what happens. 2030, a lot of offshore wind gets added suddenly. So we go from 2029 to 2030. A lot of offshore wind. 2031. Another connector that goes across the channel, basically. Not the channel. Well, yeah, the English channel. Across the Thames, in front of the Thames, right? And then 2033, they want to build a second connector, collecting all this wind from Scotland, moving it down south, and this time it lands it lands between this middle, somewhere between Manchester and Birmingham, height-wise, and there it then gets fed into this system that eventually ends up in London, in the Greater London area. And then in 2034, another one of these. That's the way they want to fix this. There's also an additional power line getting built over here, for basically going from Edinburgh to the western corridor, going down. But this is what they're trying to do. They can't go through the country anymore. Building new power lines over here, especially in this middle piece, it's not done. Adding transmission capacity over here is incredibly hard. You need to change out your pylons or build extra pylons in order to, take these cables that you need to transmit this power. So what are they trying to do? They're going to try to build 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 undersea cables, 6 undersea cables, just to move all this wind electricity to the shore, away from the shore and back to the shore. And note that we're talking about 2036 right now, right? 2036. So this is beyond 2030. What Keir Starmer is talking about when he's talking about his plans to do 95% of electricity in the UK. Look at what has to happen after 2030 in order to make this happen. And look what is going to happen. So the volume of offshore wind that gets built will become bigger and bigger and bigger. And at this moment, times are fantastic for these offshore wind farms. As you can see, there's a storm system hanging over here, northern Germany, Netherlands, There's loads and loads of wind right now. But what you can also see is where the wind isn't as strong as it is, you get capacity factors of 41%. 1,200 megawatts build, only 500 megawatts of output. So it isn't worth a damn. And if you look at it, if you look at the UK critically, I have all these black place markers over here. I have these blue place markers over here. If Keir Starmer were really, really serious about turning the UK over into a clean energy powerhouse, then first of all, he would acknowledge that the job would not be done by 2030. Yes, you can do a temporarily 100% clean electricity by 2030. That can be done at a certain point in time, during a day, maybe a week. It's a milestone that you can that you can reach at a certain point in time. A very brief point in time. It's not like you're going to be 100% renewable from then on. Forget about that. I mean, that, and also this pipe dream. Oh yes, we only want to do 5% gas by 2030. I mean, who are you kidding? Who are you kidding? The capacity factor of wind is never going to exceed 50%. Well, maybe it's going to be 55% in the absolute best spot in the sea that gets the most wind you can possibly get. Right? It's possible that you can get 55% capacity factor at a point like that, but still, it's only 55%. And remember, you're going from 50 gigawatts to 20 gigawatts, 50 gigawatts, 20 gigawatts, and there's some variability there. You have the night and day rhythm, obviously, which adds to the problem because, if you're depending on solar during the night, the solar is gone. So, I mean, I am so frustrated by the fact that these people don't understand how these electricity systems work. Listen, I'm not an expert by any means, but I do understand this stuff well enough to give you a well-informed, insightful video about this subject. So finally, 4 of UK oldest nuclear power plants to run for even longer as Hinkley Point is delayed. So this is the key problem that we need to solve. This is the key problem why the Keir Starmers of this world are talking about, oh yes, we can do 100% by 2030. It's because they have bought into this idea that if you build a ton of renewables and you build this extra system that will make sure that all the interconnectivity is there and that you have all these batteries, because it's probably going to be batteries and it's probably going to be hydrogen gas, but they don't realize that they need to add at least double as much renewables as they did in the past 15 years, but they need to do it in 6 years now. Plus, they need to build all this extra battery stuff, this hydrogen stuff. Plus, and this is going to be critical. This is going to be absolutely critical. He has to come up with a plan that ensures that the gas plants stay operational, even if they only get to sell electricity for 5% of the time. Just take a second to think about this. A gas plant, they are happy if they can sell electricity for 50% of the time, as long as the price for gas isn't as high as it is now, as long as their overhead cost isn't as high as it is now. Luckily, the UK doesn't have the European trading system, the emissions permit, the European emissions trading system, because if they would have that, that would have been a disaster, an unmitigated disaster. And that's what we're facing. We're facing this is almost like a psychosis. These people, and there's loads and loads of very smart system modelers out there, and loads of smart people working on ministries, feeding these secretaries with all this information. But it's bunk. It's junk. It's absolute junk that they're feeding them. They should be really sitting there with their heads in their hands. Oh my God, how are we going to do this? How are we going to make sure that we get to 2030? I mean, this renewables, yes, it looks nice, but if I make an Excel model, I can't make it work. I mean, everybody should try this. I can do it. I've made several Excel models where I basically emulate the power production of an entire country, and where I see, where the bottlenecks are, what the problems are, what happens if you add more renewables, what happens if you add more offshore wind, what happens if you add more onshore wind, and then you get to optimize, you see, okay, well, if I add 10 gigawatts of more nuclear, that means that we could drop the pressure on offshore wind. We need 20% less offshore wind. Why aren't these people doing this? I don't get it. They're playing a dangerous game with the future of an entire country, because their economy relies on the availability of power, the availability of electricity, cheap electricity, whenever you need it to make your products, to do your business. It's just beyond me. So what is going on? This is what you see currently, right? Let's zoom in. Nuclear capacity is expected to fall until 2031. So you have Dungeness B, you've got Hinkley Point B and Hunterston B, right? These are the drop-off points. So Dungeness B drops off here. Wait, it already dropped off. So Hinkley Point B and Hunterston B, they are now expected to stay operational until 2026. They get, I'm sorry if I mispronounce it, but I'm not English. You've got Hartlepool and Heysham 1, right? And then you got Torness and Heysham 2. And once those have shut down, I mean, look at it. You only have 1.2 gigawatts of nuclear left. And then Hinkley Point C1 and Hinkley Point C2 come online. And then it will take another 6 or 8 years before Sizewell C1 and Sizewell C2 come online. So what you see is that the UK has been caught with this hand in the cookie jar. They thought that, things were going swimmingly, and they didn't need to account for this whole stability problem. Gas was going to be there whenever they needed it. They were going to build out a lot of wind. They were going to build a lot of solar because there's so much demand for it. All these people, all these individuals, they want to have solar on their own roofs, not realizing that they would only be able to power themselves in May, June, July, August, September, October, and then in November it would start getting darker again. December you would have nothing. January it would get cold and it would snow, and forget about solar. Then February came around, and then finally April, March, it starts getting sunnier again, and everybody becomes happy again because their solar panels are working it again. In the meantime, Hinkley Point B and the other nuclear power plants that are still operational, they were basically blasting full power in order to make sure that they have this absolute minimum baseload provision. The gas plants were basically running very hard in order to make sure that the lights were being kept on. And all the wind boys and the solar boys, remember, I told you, where was this? Over here? Where was this? Because it told us who owned it, right? It's over here. Yeah, here it is. Let's see. It was the there it is. Last month, for example, when Storm Bert of all people, swept across the UK, some of its newest and biggest wind parks were still Scotland's $3 billion Seagreen project, owned by Total Energies. Total Energies. Let's not kid ourselves. Do you really think that a fossil fuel company, a huge fossil fuel company like Total, you've got British Petroleum, you've got Esso, you've got Shell, Total, I believe Total is Total French. I believe it's French, but it could also be English. I don't know. I really don't care much for fossil fuel companies. I do know where they get their money from. And I also see them caught with their hands in the cookie jar, acting as if they're renewable companies now. Forget about it. So this whole thing, this whole Keir Starmer plan, I applaud him for the idea. I applaud him for, coming over as a caring Prime Minister of the UK. But this final one, the green one, make Britain a clean energy superpower. Go kid someone else. Honestly, not with this kind of idea, plan. I mean, it's going to fail. It's that simple. It's going to fail even harder than Germany's energy transition is going to fail. And that's with nuclear. It's a bit of a rant, honestly. But that's just because I think that these governments, these people in these governments are not being serious. Right. So, with that, I want to thank you for staying here. If you haven't already, please make sure that you have subscribed to the channel. If you don't want to miss any of my videos, click the bell icon, leave a comment down below, and thank you all for watching. May the strong force be with you. Bye-bye.